Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. You. The instant the voice echoed out into Gongsun Wanner's mind, she understood everything. Bitterness filling her heart, she replied to the voice in her mind. So, you were gambling this entire time. That's not like us. You're right, Ghost Mother replied, it's not like us. But, the gamble paid off. Ghost Mother couldn't help but think back to the agreement she had made with the Gravekeeper all those years ago, and how he was the one who had come up with this entire plan. He was definitely a person worthy of deep respect. I wouldn't expect anything less from the last remaining bit of will from that most ancient individual. The truth was that from the moment she had arrived in this world, she had been gambling. After losing her left arm, her cultivation base had dropped, making it difficult for her to control the bone galleon. Even worse, without the sealing power available in her left arm, she couldn't activate the devil-conquering mirror to draw upon her most powerful divine ability, her 3 ghost flags. Those 3 flags were one of the main reasons she had become Ghost Mother to begin with. In the world beyond this world, she had paid a heavy price, and also called upon the help of a powerful expert, to capture 3 evil ghosts whose cultivation bases were analogous to the celestial level, and seal them into 3 conjoined flags. When combined, those 3 flags constituted the most powerful magical item she possessed, especially the middle one with the laughing crying ghost face. Before being sealed, that ghost had been only 1 step away from breaking out of the celestial realm. Although it never had reached the Archean realm, it could definitely be considered half Archean. All 3 of the evil ghost's cultivation bases had been reduced because of being sealed, but when the 3 flags were used together, they could push Ghost Mother's battle prowess to a level that was shocking even in the world beyond the heavens. Unfortunately, the 3 evil ghosts were unstable and difficult to control, which was why she had asked an Archean to forge the devil-conquering mirror. Normally speaking, that mirror was enough to keep the evil ghosts in check, although there was still some level of difficulty in controlling them fully. And that was why she had used a secret magic to brand herself with an eternal magical symbol, placed onto her left hand, which allowed her to summon and control the 3 evil ghosts. After her left arm was lost, Ghost Mother experienced a significant drop in her overall power. She couldn't control the sealing mark in the devil-conquering mirror, and therefore, when the Celestial returned her left arm to her, she could only gamble on the outcome. She had gambled that the ever-suspicious Celestial wouldn't trust anyone fully, and would eventually make a move on Gongsun Wanner. And of course, this was all based on information given to her by the Gravekeeper, based on his personal analysis. She had also gambled that her left arm, personified in Gongsun Wanner, would have made other preparations. Therefore, the moment when the Celestial began to fight Gongsun Wanner was the moment for Ghost Mother to make her comeback. In truth, it wasn't quite correct to say that she had been unable to fight back against the Celestial's world projection. Instead, she had allowed Gongsun Wanner to begin to consume her in order to create all of the opportunities needed. You win, Gongsun Wanner replied in her mind. Take me home. Of course, that conversation happened in the brief time it takes to snap a finger. There were no other options available to Gongsun Wanner. She didn't want to become a slave of the Celestial, and therefore, she simply closed her eyes and lapsed into silence. The instant she closed her eyes, the black smoke around her took the shape of Ghost Mother. You, the Celestial gasped, his face falling. He had gone all out to bolster the strength of his sealing mark, but in the moment before it completely locked down Gongsun Wanner, Ghost Mother appeared next to her. Ghost Trio, your time has come. Intense rumbling sounds filled the air, the source being one of the 3 flags on the bone galleon, which exploded violently. A roar of rage erupted out as a huge ghost face materialized, radiating shocking energy that surpassed the demigod realm and came close to the celestial realm. The ghost had 3 horns, dark violet skin, and was fiendish in appearance. The instant the ghost face appeared, it shot toward the world projection sealing mark, causing the Celestial's face to flicker. The Celestial prepared to intervene, but before he could, a rumbling sound even more intense than the previous one erupted into the air. The second flag exploded, and a second ghost face flew out. This ghost was green, with numerous eyes. Furthermore, when it opened its mouth, even more eyes were visible inside. Its energy was just as close to the celestial realm as the other ghosts, and in fact, was a bit more powerful. It was like a fiendish monster that, upon being unleashed, charged directly toward the world projection sealing mark. The Celestial was clearly very anxious by this point, and was just preparing to take defensive action to block the 2 ghost faces when a third appeared. The third flag exploded, unleashing even more brutally powerful fluctuations, along with vicious, cackling laughter. "You finally freed me, Ghost Mother," said a voice that shook all heaven and earth. It was like a combination of countless evil ghosts all roaring at the same time, causing everything in the area to tremble violently. This ghost face was half black and half white. It was clearly laughing, but at the same time, seemed to be crying. Or perhaps it would be better to say that it was clearly crying, but seemed to be laughing at the same time. It was bizarre to the extreme, to the point where anyone who looked at it would be so shaken they began to tremble physically. The nascent soul cultivators on board felt their life force being sucked out of their eyes, ears, noses, and mouths, and no matter what they did to try to defend themselves, it was useless. Bai Xiaochun gasped, and began to tremble in fear. He actually recognized this most powerful of the ghost faces. It was the very same face that had smiled ferociously at him from within the flag back when he first saw the bone galleon. This ghost face was so shockingly powerful that it seemed to be perfectly on par with the celestial. Bai Xiaochun wasn't the only one to be visibly taken aback. The celestial was clearly struck with profound anxiety at the sight of these three ghost faces shooting toward his world projection ceiling mark. They were moving so quickly that it was obvious there was no way to stop them from reaching their target. When they struck, the resulting boom was so loud it threatened to shatter the world. A huge depression appeared in the ceiling mark, which clearly could not stand up to a celestial level strike. Cracks spread out across its surface, and then it shattered. Even more shocking to Bai Xiaochun was that, as the ceiling mark shattered, the laughing, crying ghost face's eyes lit up with a gleam of greed, and he began to consume the destroyed fragments. With every piece that he swallowed, the excitement in his eyes grew more intense. "Delicious. Ha ha ha. It's been a long time since I've enjoyed flavor like this. This world seems full of tasty things. I want to eat them all. How dare you, you vile thing." The celestial howled. He was just about to step forward to attack when the laughing, crying ghost face turned and looked at him, eyes shining with bizarre light. "Ah, a quasi-celestial. I think I'll eat you too." Laughing loudly, the ghost face abandoned the shattered remnants of the ceiling mark and shot toward the celestial. The other two ghost faces looked on, clearly terrified of the laughing, crying ghost face. However, after a moment, they joined in to attack the celestial. Everything was happening too quickly. Everyone on the bone galleon was having their life force sucked away from them, and as a result, were completely ashen-faced and in despair. The devas had it a bit better off, and in fact, Bai Xiaochun wasn't losing any life force at all. However, his eyes were completely bloodshot as he stood there glaring at Ghost Mother. He looked like he was about to explode. Now that the world projection ceiling mark had been destroyed, and the three ghost faces were harrying the celestial, Ghost Mother once again turned into a huge mouth that turned to consume Gongsun Wan'er. And of course, Gongsun Wan'er was still occupying Hu Xiaomei's body. Hu Xiaomei shivered, and black smoke began to pour out of her eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. It rapidly transformed into the image of a young girl, who looked around bitterly at the world around her, and then glanced back at Hu Xiaomei. "Don't hurt her," she murmured. Then she closed her eyes, and her soul body was swallowed up by Ghost Mother. At that point, another soul body emerged, which belonged to none other than Hu Xiaomei. It too began to float toward Ghost Mother. Bai Xiaochun felt like his heart was being torn apart. Blue veins bulged out on his neck and face, and his eyes turned more bloodshot than ever. Then, he shouted out in a voice that even attracted the notice of the celestial and the three ghost faces. "Ghost Mother, if you want to consume Gongsun Wan'er, that's your business. But if you hurt Hu Xiaomei, then I, Bai Xiaochun, swear an oath that, whether I have to go to the highest heavens or the deepest hells to do it, I will kill you." Bai Xiaochun's voice was hoarse, despondent, and yet filled with indescribable determination. As he spoke, it seemed as though his words resonated with the natural laws of heaven and earth, causing them to echo out in explosive fashion. Ghost Mother was currently absorbing Gongsun Wan'er, and as a result, her facial features were becoming clear. Her eyes, nose, and mouth all appeared, revealing the face of a lovely young woman. She had fair skin and entrancing eyes, and overall, was incredibly beautiful. Her previously severed left arm was growing back, and within moments, looked as ordinary as ever. At the same time, a devastatingly powerful aura sprang up from her. "Are you threatening me?" she asked, looking at Bai Xiaochun with eyes as entrancing as the stars in the sky. However, Bai Xiaochun was not entranced in the least. Seemingly hovering on the brink of insanity, he grated, "No. Not a threat, just a promise." Bai Xiaochun wasn't really thinking about what he was saying. If he were, then considering his personality, he wouldn't ever dare to say something like this to Ghost Mother. But That was just one of the contradictions that was part of Bai Xiaochun. Although he feared death, whenever he saw someone he considered to be a friend or family member in trouble, he would not flee or act with cowardice. In this moment, Bai Xiaochun didn't even know what fear was. All he knew was that Hu Xiaomei's life was on the line. In fact, he had already decided that, if he had to, he would call upon his apprentice, and even summon the gravekeeper if necessary, to stop Ghost Mother. From the madness in his eyes, it was possible to tell what he was thinking, and how determined he was. Ghost Mother could see it, and it shook her deeply. She could already sense the will of the world around her thrumming in response to the oath that he had just sworn. For some reason, her heart began to pound. In her eyes, Bai Xiaochun was nothing but a mere diva. Were it not for the gravekeeper's command medallion that he had, she could crush him to death without even thinking about it. However, her intuition was telling her that if she consumed Hu Xiaomei's soul, then one day in the future, she would end up facing an incredibly powerful foe because of it. In response to that sudden feeling, Ghost Mother's eyes flickered, and the huge mouth she had summoned to consume Hu Xiaomei's soul suddenly vanished. Waving her hand, she sent Hu Xiaomei's soul flying back into her body. Not a bad physical body. Plus she's strangely connected to this kid. I guess she would make a good choice for an apprentice. Having made her decision, she waved her arm, sending the unconscious Hu Xiaomei flying into her sleeve. With that, she turned back to the bone galleon. Bai Xiaochun's eyes nearly welled up with tears of blood, and he was panting heavily. Meanwhile, the celestial continued to fall back in the face of the three ghost faces. Ghost Mother, he cried urgently. We had an agreement. We had an agreement? She interrupted. She laughed. What a joke. The scorn in her eyes couldn't have been clearer. Before, she had been forced to put on an act, but now, there was no one in this world other than the mysterious gravekeeper who she would possibly fear. She didn't even care about this quasi-celestial. Were he not so tied together with the power of the world around him, she might have killed him and turned him into a fourth flag. Unfortunately, he is bolstered by the power of the world, which would make him very hard to kill right now. If only I could break out of the celestial realm and into the Archean realm. Then I could ignore the natural laws and kill him. Right now, though, only someone from these lands could kill him without worrying about the blessing of the world. To be openly scorned by Ghost Mother in front of so many other cultivators caused an unsightly expression to appear on the celestial's face. He was really having a hard time accepting this. Moments ago, victory had been in sight, but now the tables had been completely turned. Not only did his plan to make Gongsun Wanner a slave fail, but now, Ghost Mother was back in a position of power. Gravekeeper, you bastard, you've blocked me at every turn, he growled to himself. You did it in the wildlands, and now here I can see the traces of your hand. I refuse to accept this. I vow to escape from this world. I rule this world. He truly felt like going mad. After all, if it weren't for his serious injuries, things would have turned out very different this day. Before he could say anything else, Ghost Mother touched down onto the bone galleon. Although she looked spectacularly beautiful, she also was profoundly scornful. Now the time has come to leave his world, and go home. Vile celestial bone galleon, set sail. With that, she waved her hand, causing rumbling sounds to fill the air, and the entire ship to vibrate. At the same time, the sea of bones surrounding it was transformed into ashes. Crevices snaked out across the surface of the dead mire, from within which bone spikes emerged. In fact, from one of the largest crevices emerged a sinister bone tail. It was almost as if some enormous creature were about to climb out from under the ground. Many of the cultivators that remained felt a massive force slamming into them, causing blood to spray out of their mouths as they were hurled off of the ship. Bai Xiaochun was included among them. At the same time, the bone galleon began to rise up into the sky. Countless gasps could be heard as the main body of the ship, which up to this point had never been seen, became visible. This, heavens! The bone galleon is actually only part of something larger. The bigger part was hidden beneath the surface of the ground. Bai Xiaochun was just as shocked as everyone else to see an even larger bone ship rising up from the ground. More precisely, what had been visible before was only part of the larger bone galleon. Now that the bone sea was destroyed, and the dead mire was falling apart, the full, ancient ship was being revealed. Shockingly, it was an enormous lizard made from bones. It was so large that it was almost impossible to look at from one end to the other. Furthermore, the bone galleon which had been visible before, was only part of the lizard's head. This shocking development went beyond what anyone could have imagined. Numerous cultivators, including Bai Lin, Zhao Tianzhao, and others familiar to Bai Xiaochun, were so astonished they coughed up blood. Rumbling sounds filled heaven and earth as Ghost Mother threw her arms wide, causing the sky to distort and a vortex to appear. Through that vortex, Bai Xiaochun could see what appeared to be another world. Although it wasn't clear enough to make out any details, he could sense it beyond the shadow of a doubt. Time to go home, Ghost Mother cried. The deadmire began to collapse as the huge bone lizard shot up toward the vortex. From a distance, it almost looked like that lizard was punching a hole into the sky. It was at that exact same moment that Bai Xiaochun realized that, not only was Hu Xiaomei being taken away, but there were other cultivators stuck on the bone galleon as well. In fact, there were dozens. And one of them was Big Fatty Zhang. Big Fatty Zhang stood on the deck, trembling as he looked up at the vortex. Then he looked at Ghost Mother with her upraised arms. At that point, a tremor passed through Big Fatty Zhang, and he recalled the dream he had experienced. Is this the new world? As the bone lizard rose up into the sky, the three ghost faces were tugged unwillingly away from the celestial and toward the vortex. However, the laughing crying ghost face seemed far more defiant than the other two. I like this world. I don't want to leave. I want to stay. However, no matter how hard it struggled, it couldn't escape from the control of the bone galleon and was dragged ever upward. Soon, the bone lizard was only moments away from entering the vortex. Down below, a look of indescribable longing could be seen on the face of the celestial. In terms of attitude, his was the polar opposite of the laughing crying ghost face. He had long yearned to be able to reach the peak of the world he lived in, and then step beyond it. However, after all this time, he was still stuck in the same place. It was almost as if he were in a huge prison. He didn't want to live in this world. He wanted to leave it. If he forced his way out, the world would be destroyed, and everyone in it killed. And yet, he still wanted to leave. Big Fatty Zhang and the other cultivators stuck on the bone galleon were heading into extreme danger. But for the Celestial, that ship and that vortex represented the future. The Celestial burst into motion, becoming a beam of bright light that shot toward the vortex. However, not only did he feel pressure pushing at him from above, but the lands below also tugged him down. It was actually impossible for him to even get close to the vortex. In fact, the will of the world, which was part of him, recognized what he was doing, and began to tremble on the verge of collapse. At that point, a howl of defiant rage escaped the Celestial's lips. Gravekeeper, you bastard, one of these days, I will escape this place. His words shook the world like heavenly thunder, and even caused lightning bolts to appear in the air around the huge bone lizard. A sea of lightning appeared, almost like a huge hand that then grabbed at the lizard. The Celestial was using his last bit of power to try to prevent the bone galleon from leaving. Tinged with the power of the Heavenspan River, the lightning hand was golden as it closed in on the bone lizard. However, before the hand could actually touch the lizard, Ghost Mother chuckled coldly and performed a double-handed incantation gesture. Instantly, black smoke erupted from the lizard and shot toward the golden lightning hand. Rumbling sounds filled the air as the two made contact. Clearly, the lightning hand was no match for the smoke, as it began to tremble and fall to pieces. Before it could be completely destroyed, though, the laughing crying ghost face suddenly used an unknown technique to change directions and shoot toward the hand. This sudden turn of events caught Ghost Mother by surprise, and a murderous aura sprang up from her. Even the Celestial was shocked. However, he reacted quickly, and sent the golden hand speeding toward the laughing crying ghost face. A huge boom rang out as the laughing crying ghost face was snatched up by the Celestial's huge hand. Then, as the hand descended back toward the Celestial, and then opened up, the laughing crying ghost face was nowhere to be seen. The Celestial stood there, eyes flickering with thought. When Ghost Mother saw what had occurred, her murderous aura grew even more intense, and yet, she didn't say anything. Looking back down at the world below one last time, she turned her attention away, and sent the bone lizard into the vortex. However, it was in that moment that something happened that not even the Celestial could ever have predicted. Down in the destroyed bone sea, a figure shot up into the air at high speed. It was none other than Bai Xiaochun. Ghost Mother, give Hu Xiaomei and my eldest brother back to me. He had long since decided to throw caution to the wind. He simply couldn't stand idly by as Hu Xiaomei and Big Fatty Zhang were taken into that vortex. He moved with incredible speed, shooting up toward the disappearing bone lizard. As for the cultivators who remained down below, they looked on with surprise and astonishment. The Celestial's eyes narrowed. From what he could tell, everything that was happening reeked of the Gravekeeper's meddling, and he couldn't help but be suspicious about why the Gravekeeper hadn't made an appearance. The old ghost's schemes run too deep. I refuse to believe that he did all this simply to hurt me. There must be some other goal he's working toward. Ghost Mother looked down from the bone lizard at Bai Xiaochun, and could see the bloodshot madness in his eyes. However, it didn't matter how fast he was going, there was no way for him to catch up to the bone lizard. Before he could even get close, it was in the vortex and fading away. In the last moment before it was gone, Ghost Mother's lips moved as she transmitted a message to Bai Xiaochun. Don't worry, I have an agreement with the Gravekeeper. Because of that, I will keep your friends safe. The girl has unique qualities that conform to the techniques I cultivate. I will take her as an apprentice. As for the other cultivators on board, I will keep them safe. Bai Xiaochun hovered there in midair, looking powerlessly at the disappearing vortex. Xiaomei, eldest brother. At the moment, he felt completely helpless and lonely. He suddenly thought back to the dream Big Fatty Zhang had told him about. Clearly, his eldest brother had anticipated this moment for a long time. Bai Xiaochun could only hope that Ghost Mother was telling the truth. As he grew older, as he advanced his cultivation base and increased his longevity, Bai Xiaochun was coming to realize that growing up came with a price. This wasn't his first time feeling it. He had experienced this same sensation often in the past, and it always left him feeling powerless. The only thing he wasn't sure about was whether to blame himself or the world around him. He just wanted to practice cultivation and be happy. He just wanted to live his life and smile and laugh. Pain and bitterness gripped his heart as he wondered if he would ever see Big Fatty Zhang and Hu Xiaomei again. Hopefully so, he murmured to himself. He was so wrapped up in his thoughts that he didn't notice how, as the vortex vanished and the deadmire collapsed, the restrictive spells in the area began to unravel. There was now nothing in the deadmire to cause problems for cultivators. Perhaps, after many years passed, the area would return to its normal state, and people would be able to pass through it freely. The Celestial left to chase the laughing crying ghost face, and didn't take anyone with him, not even Du Lingfei. Du Lingfei looked up at Bai Xiaochun, mixed emotions visible on her face. She seemed to be in a bleak mood as well, but she managed to take a deep breath, fly up, and grasp Bai Xiaochun's hand. Xiaochun, don't be sad. I'm sure that you'll see them again one day. Bai Xiaochun looked over, and could tell that, as she clasped his hand, she was trying to pass all of the warmth and hope she could into him. After a long moment, he nodded. There were less than 200 cultivators left on the shattered bones below. All of them were wounded in one way or another. Even Du Lingfei, despite having been in her father's bag of holding, had been affected by the battle with Ghost Mother and Gongsun Wan'er. No one was hurt too badly, but all of them would need time to recover. Soon, the entire group began making their way toward the exit of the deadmire. Not only did they need to get to a place where they could focus on recovering, but they also needed to determine where exactly they were. Whichever branch of the river was nearest, they would make their way to the river source sect there, and then use teleportation portals to get home. They traveled in silence, their hearts heavy. The twin Master Cloud Lightnings, Guru Spirit Immortal and Master Thousand Ghost were devas, and as such, leaders within the group, but even they were wounded, and were still trembling in shock from everything that had happened. The trial by fire was not at all how anyone had expected it to be. Profound secrets had been laid bare, secrets which surpassed the imaginations of everyone present. Eventually, they reached the end of the deadmire, and found themselves looking at a world of snow and ice. When the twin Master Cloud Lightnings felt the frigid chi in the area, their jaws dropped. They weren't the only ones. The other cultivators from the north all looked around, eyes sparkling with delight. The north. We're in the north. I can sense the frigid spiritual energy of the north. This part of the deadmire was attached to the northern Heavenspan River region. Bai Xiaochun was still dispirited and downcast. However, it was in that moment that his expression flickered, and he looked down at his bag of holding. Is something wrong? Du Lingfei asked curiously. No, it's nothing, he replied, avoiding the topic. However, waves of shock were battering his heart. Just now, he had sensed that, within the coffin that Patriarch Spirit Stream had given him, the sleeping baby girl had murmured something to him. The aura of home. Bai Xiaochun was quite certain that he wasn't hearing things. Whether it was the voice in his head, or the fluctuations coming from his bag of holding, he was certain that she's awake. Shaken, he sent a stream of divine sense into his bag of holding to check on the coffin. However, all observations indicated that the baby girl was sleeping, her eyes closed, not a trace of life force on her whatsoever. Because of how many people were around, he couldn't very well take out the coffin and examine it closely in front of them. Therefore, he buried his questions in his heart, looked over at Du Lingfei, and shook his head. No, it's nothing. Before Du Lingfei could respond, the twin Master Cloud Lightnings chuckled coldly. Of course it's nothing. What, you find out you're in the north, and you're scared all of a sudden? The twin master cloud lightnings had been suppressing their anger for too long now. Bai Xiaochun had killed their beloved apprentice, creating a grudge that could only be resolved by death. However, the details of Bai Xiaochun's identity had caused intense fear to spring up in their hearts. Not only had they not dared to try to kill him, but being worried that he would try to get revenge on them, they had already considered giving him some gifts to smooth things over. But after everything which had occurred later, and given that the twin master cloud lightnings were devas, they were easily able to see how the celestial actually viewed the situation. The celestial doesn't really view him as a son-in-law. Although he's in some sort of relationship with Du Lingfei, unless the celestial approves of it, he's just like any other diva. In any of the other rivers, I might need to fear him, but this is the north. Even if he's a dragon normally, he's a worm to me here. The twin master cloud lightnings chuckled coldly, and did nothing to mask the cold gleams in their eyes. The truth was, just as they had been musing, in the north, which was controlled by their sect, they would have the upper hand when dealing with Bai Xiaochun. In response to the twin master cloud lightning's words, the other surrounding cultivators' expressions flickered. The cultivators from the south and the west didn't say anything. They didn't want to get involved in any posturing right now. But things were different with the northerners. Virtually all of the northern cultivators' eyes glittered. Now that they were surrounded by frigid qi, their cultivation bases could rotate more rapidly than before. Looking over at Bai Xiaochun and the other easterners, they adopted the same hostile attitude as the twin master cloud lightnings. The eastern cultivators wanted to make a stand of sorts, but the dangers they had faced recently, and the fact that they were now in the north, sapped them of any ability to do so. As for Bai Xiaochun, under normal circumstances, he would not have simply accepted the twin master cloud lightning's ridicule and the hostility of the northern cultivators. But right now, he was in no mood for such things. His heart still hurt because of Hu Xiaomei and Big Fatty Zhang. Furthermore, he was still feeling shaken that the baby girl had spoken to him. The only thing he wanted to do was go to the Nine Heavens Cloud Lightning Sect's teleportation portal and leave this place. Furthermore, he had no desire to go back to the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Sect. He wanted to go back to the River Defying Sect, and take some time to calm down and recover. Therefore, it was in rare fashion that he didn't even respond. The twin master cloud lightnings said more snide things, and the northern cultivators continued to glare at him in hostile fashion, but he just walked onward. He felt like returning to the east on his own, and the truth was that he had his ways to do that if he wanted to. But he couldn't leave the other eastern cultivators behind on their own. If he did, they could very well end up suffering because of it. When the twin master cloud lightnings saw Bai Xiaochun's reaction, they laughed coldly, but ceased any sarcastic jibes. After all, the visiting cultivators were just passing through, and would reach the teleportation portal soon. He's just lucky. The truth was that the twin master cloud lightnings had hoped that Bai Xiaochun would start arguing with them, and provide an excuse to fight. Although they probably couldn't kill him, they could at least injure him in a way that would take dozens of years to recover. Du Lingfei never got to reply to Bai Xiaochun. However, the look in her eye when she saw the northerners' hostility was noticed by the twin master cloud lightnings, and was another main reason why he didn't take any action. And thus, the cultivators left the dead mire and headed into the northern Heavenspan River region. The northerners were all very excited, whereas the cultivators from the other three river branches were much more reserved. The lands around them were frozen, the sky was dark, and an icy cold breeze blew constantly, providing the only sound to be heard. There were ice mountains everywhere, jagged and sharp, and profoundly cold. Occasional flurries of snowflakes would rise up, but considering the cultivation bases of the travelers, they would melt as soon as they touched them. In surroundings like these, mortals would quickly freeze to death. But even the weakest of these cultivators were in the nascent soul stage, and thus, they were unharmed. Before long, they caught sight of a mighty, golden river which flowed off into the distance. It was none other than the northern Heavenspan River. In the north, where it was so cold that virtually nothing could live, the Heavenspan River water flowed eternally, and was not frozen. So this is the north. Bai Xiaochun murmured, looking around and thinking about the Spirit Stream sect, and the frigid school. There was little talk as the cultivators turned into bright beams of light and shot through the freezing lands toward the Nine Heavens Cloud Lightning sect. Before long, that mighty and majestic sect was on the horizon. Eventually, Bai Xiaochun looked up and saw an enormous and shocking waterfall at the end of the Heavenspan River. Just like the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, the waterfall connected the sea above with the river below, fueling the flow of the river. At the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, the area surrounding the waterfall was filled with lush vegetation. But the Nine Heavens Cloud Lightning sect was different. The area surrounding the waterfall was a vast expanse of frozen white. Furthermore, flanking the waterfall on either side were two enormous statues of ice. They were majestic to the point of defying description, and radiated a shocking energy and profound pressure. The statue on the left depicted a scholarly and refined middle-aged man. He was gazing up into the heavens, and even stretching out his right hand out toward the sky. His hand was empty of any physical object. However, it propped up a majestic white cloud, so large that it appeared to be a landmass of some sort. In fact, countless buildings existed on the cloud, and beams of light could be seen flying to and fro between them. Those beams of light were obviously cultivators. Bai Xiaochun gasped at the sight of it. Based on what he remembered learning of the Nine Heavens Cloud Lightning sect, he realized that the cloud in the hand of that statue must be the sect's cloud order. In that case, the lightning order must be on the right. He shifted his gaze to the statue on the right, which also depicted a middle-aged man. However, this man was by no means scholarly and refined. He looked like a warrior, with blazing, threatening eyes. Furthermore, lightning danced to and fro all over him. There was a cloud in his upraised left hand as well, but this cloud was black. It looked like a storm cloud, and much like the white cloud on the other side of the river, was covered with buildings and filled with cultivators. In addition to the difference in color, this cloud appeared to be filled with silver lightning bolts, as well as the muffled rumble of thunder. It was none other than the lightning order. The Nine Heavens Cloud Lightning sect ranks their disciples by cultivation base. First heaven disciples are the lowest ranked, with ninth heaven disciples being the highest. Furthermore, their sect is split into two orders, those being the cloud order and the lightning order. At this point, his gaze drifted upward, beyond the clouds being held up by the statues, to two coffins, one large and one small. The large coffin was pitch black, and emanated an air of extreme ancientness, as though it had existed for countless years within the stream of time. Within that coffin, Bai Xiaochun could just barely make out diva fluctuations. That must be the equivalent of the starry sky Dao polarity sect's blue rainbow. That's where their devas reside. That means the smaller coffin must be the home of the demigod. Having reached this point in his train of thought, he focused his gaze on the ultimate pinnacle of the Nine Heavens Cloud Lightning sect. There was a crystal coffin. It was only 30% the size of the pitch-black coffin, but it occupied the highest location in the sect, and emanated a shocking aura. The twin master cloud lightnings looked around at the shocked expressions on the faces of the surrounding cultivators, smiled, and said, "Welcome to the Nine Heavens Cloud Lightning sect." The northern cultivators were all visibly excited to be home after such a deadly ordeal. In almost the same moment that the twin master cloud lightnings spoke, piercing whistling sounds erupted from within the sect, and numerous beams of light shot down from the two clouds, as well as from the black coffin. There were also diva fluctuations. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 sets of diva fluctuations pushed away the will of the heavens as 4 enormous faces appeared up above, to stare down at the newly arrived crowd. The gazes of one of those faces suddenly shifted to focus on Bai Xiaochun, and then spoke in a voice that echoed like the roar of heavenly thunder. "You killed a disciple from the north, didn't you? Bai Xiaochun." This diva clearly had ill intentions, and was domineering to the extreme. Bai Xiaochun's eyelid twitched. Of these 4 northern devas, 3 were men and 1 was a woman. The woman was not middle-aged, but neither was she young. However, she was very beautiful, albeit grimly frightening. Of the 3 men, 2 were older, and 1 was middle-aged. The latter was very handsome, with sword-like eyebrows and eyes that glittered like stars. Bai Xiaochun had seen quite a few handsome male cultivators in his time, but had to admit that none of them could compare to this man in terms of good looks. In fact, it left him feeling a little prickly. This middle-aged cultivator was just too handsome. Plus, he had a very high cultivation base. Considering how his eyes glittered, he was clearly the type who female cultivators would find incredibly attractive. By this point, the cultivators from the west and south, including Master Thousand Ghost and Guru Spirit Immortal, had all backed away from the eastern cultivators. Zhao Tianzhao and Bai Lin both had nervous expressions on their face. As for Song Ke, he wasn't quite sure how to feel. Although he was nervous, he was also itching to see what Bai Xiaochun would do. After all, it seemed like an irresolvable situation. The northern devas probably wouldn't dare to actually kill Bai Xiaochun, but it seemed unlikely that they would hold back from unleashing their fury on him. Song Ke was right in his assessment. The twin master cloud lightnings had sent messages on their way back, which led to the northern devas immediately coming to cause problems for Bai Xiaochun upon his arrival. The twin master cloud lightnings chuckled coldly, their eyes flickering with icy light. HMPH. Maybe we can't handle him alone, but with everyone together, it should be easy. Bai Xiaochun suddenly felt the pressure building up. Although he was in a despondent mood, this sudden development with the devas caused his heart to begin to pound. Without the twin master cloud lightnings, the Nine Heavens Cloud Lightning sect had 4 devas. However, if the twin master cloud lightnings were counted, then Bai Xiaochun wasn't sure if that meant they had 6 devas or 5. Either way, he would be completely dominated. And that wasn't even mentioning the fact that there was a demigod in that crystal coffin up above. To have 4 enormous diva faces staring down at him caused him to groan inwardly. In fact, if the twin master cloud lightnings weren't present, he would definitely look around in confusion and ask who Bai Xiaochun was. But now, he had no choice but to take a deep breath and stare back with bloodshot eyes. I'm a mighty and majestic diva, he thought. Even if my bones get broken and my blood gets spilled, I can't let myself look scared. Heart thrumming with madness, he stepped forward, looked up at the faces and slipped his arm around Du Lingfei's waist. Du Lingfei had already been trying to think of a way to resolve the situation, but before she could even do anything, Bai Xiaochun stepped forward and put his arm around her. Shocked, she looked over. To any observer, Bai Xiaochun would look impressive to the extreme, the type of person who looked down condescendingly on all creation. Then, in front of all of the cultivators from the north, west, and south, and as the eastern cultivators looked on nervously to see how things would play out, Bai Xiaochun leaned over and kissed Du Lingfei loudly on the cheek. Song Qiu's eyes went blank with shock, and the twin master cloud lightnings frowned. The northern devas looked on in shock, especially the handsome cultivator, whose eyes began to burn with anger. Wifey, Bai Xiaochun said loudly, since our dad, the exalted celestial, is gone, that leaves it up to us to patrol the north. Oh, I seem to remember that you have an elder brother here, right? Could you put in a good word for me with him? Actually, since we're already here in the north, we should probably go offer some formal greetings. Song Ke gasped out loud. Zhao Tianzhao and Bai Lin stared with eyes as wide as saucers. As for Master Thousand Ghost and Guru Spirit Immortal, they looked on with expressions of complete disbelief. Although the twin master cloud lightnings had been aware of the general situation, they could never have guessed that Bai Xiaochun would so shamelessly bank on his tenuous connection to the demigod patriarch. The other northern devas were clearly hesitating. The truth was that even they were scared of Du Lingfei. At the same time, they were profoundly struck by how shameless Bai Xiaochun was. A mighty and majestic diva who seeks help from a woman. What kind of a clown is this guy? This Bai Xiaochun is exactly like the rumors say he is. He's treacherous, crafty, and has no sense of shame. Bai Xiaochun couldn't care less what the crowd was thinking, and even gave a proud harumph. As far as he was concerned, only an idiot would start a fight in a situation like this. Du Lingfei was feeling very out of sorts. Face scarlet, she glared over at Bai Xiaochun, opened her mouth, and was about to say something when an enraged shout interrupted her from above. Get your filthy hands off of her, Bai Xiaochun. It was none other than the handsome, middle-aged diva, who became a bright beam of light that shot down toward Bai Xiaochun. He had a mid-diva realm cultivation base, and drew fully upon it, becoming a destructive meteor that bore down on Bai Xiaochun in the blink of an eye. Bai Xiaochun was a bit surprised by this handsome cultivator's outburst, but there was no time to ponder the situation. Without any hesitation, he clenched his left hand into a fist and punched out into the air toward the man. A rumbling boom could be heard, and Bai Xiaochun fell back a few paces, as did the handsome cultivator. At the same time, a murderous aura sprang up from Du Lingfei, and she shouted, "What do you think you're doing, Feng Chen?" Pointing angrily at Bai Xiaochun, Feng Chen said, "Lingfei, I can't believe this cretin would dare to sully you in my presence. I'm going to kill him." Bai Xiaochun was more than a little surprised at how this handsome Feng Chen addressed Du Lingfei. Blinking a few times, he looked at Du Lingfei and said, "You two know each other?" Before Du Lingfei could reply, Feng Chen blurred into motion, attacking Bai Xiaochun yet again. At the same time, the other devas began to move in Bai Xiaochun's direction. Bai Xiaochun gasped at the sensation of so much killing intent directed at him. There were 4 devas coming at him from all directions, making escape impossible. No matter which way he dodged, he would be facing a dangerous attack. At this point, cracking sounds filled the air as he roared and drew upon the living mountain incantation. Without any hesitation, he used the mountain-shaking bash, the undying hex, and a quintuple power undying emperor's fist. The frigid coldness in the area suddenly grew more intense. The 4 northern devas were clearly surprised by this shocking fist strike, and yet none of them backed up. Instead, they continued on with full force to meet it. A huge boom rang out, and Bai Xiaochun staggered backward. At the same time, the twin master cloud lightnings leapt into the fray. Now there were 6 devas working together. As they closed in, they sealed off the spiritual power in the area, making it more difficult to utilize divine abilities. At this point, Bai Xiaochun let out a shout as he got ready to crush one of his drops of undying blood. After all, he had no other options at his disposal. These people were being complete bullies, leaving him with only his godkiller technique, which he couldn't control very well. Cultivators from the other 3 river branches, he said, back up immediately. It was a critical moment in which Bai Xiaochun was just about to use the godkiller. Only a few breaths worth of time had passed since the northern devas made their move, and already, it was a dangerous situation. At this point, Du Lingfei looked up at the crystal coffin and spoke in a loud voice, "Elder brother Zhou, is this how you treat your junior sister when she brings people for a visit? According to the rules my father set for the trial by fire, deaths would be unavoidable. Don't tell me the North plans to use governmental authority to avenge private grudges?" The instant Du Lingfei finished speaking, laughter rang out from the crystal coffin. Then, the sky flashed with bright colors as a young man appeared out of thin air. He waved his hand, and although it didn't seem like he exerted any power to do so, massive force exploded in the air between Bai Xiaochun and the other devas. The 6 northerners' divine abilities were instantly suppressed, and a gentle force shoved them backward. Things didn't go as smoothly for Bai Xiaochun, though. His divine abilities were forcefully crushed, and a powerful force slammed into him. He grunted, coughing up a mouthful of blood as he staggered backward several steps. Gasping for breath, he looked up with bloodshot eyes at the young man hovering up above, radiating demigod fluctuations. A very grim expression overtook Bai Xiaochun's face. Were it not for his unusually strong fleshly body, the blow from just now would have seriously injured him. The young man glanced at Bai Xiaochun, then shifted his gaze to Du Lingfei, toward whom he smiled and said, "Little junior sister, do you really need to talk to your 4th elder brother like that? Well, I guess I shouldn't get into any bickering. Men, activate the teleportation portal and send these cultivators back home to the other 3 river branches." Immediately, elders from the 9 heavens cloud lightning sect activated the teleportation portal, causing rumbling sounds to fill the sect. Master Thousand Ghost and Guru Spirit Immortal offered respectful greetings to the demigod patriarch, and then led their subordinates to the teleportation portal. Within moments, they vanished. Bai Xiaochun suppressed his rage, and led his own people toward the teleportation portal, surrounded by the sarcastic gazes and cold comments of the northern cultivators, as well as the naked killing intent of the devas. However, it was in that moment that intense fluctuations which surpassed the demigods suddenly descended onto the 9 heavens cloud lightning sect. The demigod's face fell, and even Du Lingfei looked surprised. Bai Xiaochun and the Easterners looked up to see an enormous magical symbol descending from the sky. At a certain point, the symbol shattered, and a solemn voice echoed out in all directions. Bai Xiaochun is hereby appointed as a special guard to the emissary. He will assist Heavenspan emissary Du Lingfei in an inspection tour of the north. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.